Hello, everyone in the College Confidence families. I am so excited to bring a special guest, Leslie Crumley. She is with Structured Success. And the time is perfect because right now, for parents of high school seniors who are applying to college, your seniors are probably really busy with college applications, finalizing the college list. And then you have probably heard as parents, like this October 1st timeline's coming up. And that is the opening day of FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And that's probably getting you thinking like, oh, college planning in terms of finances. Should we get going on that? Right? And there's another form called the CSS profile that might also be a part of your teen's college application to get financial aid. So Leslie is here to help us figure out, like, are we ready to engage in financial planning? And hopefully we all know what the affordability factor is, but if we don't, Leslie will help us. And I am hoping, Leslie, that we also have families with younger children, as young as middle school, early high school, where they do have some time to learn from you and really kind of pace it out at a slower rate. Yes. So when their teen's a senior, they're going to be like, oh, we're so ready for the October 1st opening day. So Leslie, thank you so much for joining us and taking care of our families.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to share what I know. It seems like yesterday that it was, I think, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning that I made my daughter get up and submit the FAFSA form because I didn't want them to run out of funding. So I understand like the anxiety that goes along with this process. So hopefully I can share some tips and tricks that are going to really help you. And the first one really is taking a deep breath and just breathe it in and let it go and really look at your mindset and not get caught up in the hysteria. Because in my mind's eye, this is like a big old magic trick. Our eye is put on what school, what's the best school we can get into, right? And we get all, excited about all of the beautiful things that schools and colleges can offer. But then we don't look at the flip side of that. And we certainly haven't talked to our kids, and they haven't been taught in school about how do you really look at the money. And I find it super interesting that you go to school, a lot of people's goals is so their kid can do better, right?
Right.
And make more money. But we're not going to talk to them about the money that they're going to make. It just really is just this really interesting way of going about the process. So
yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like it just takes me back. I was a high school college counselor, and I wrote an article in 2013,
right,
about the big elephant in the room when families would come and we'd have their junior year meeting, and I would always raise the financial aid question. And there would always be this awkward silence because parents didn't want to reveal, or they wanted to keep it secret, or they feared that if they talked about money, their teen would lose motivation to, and they always said, son or daughter, your job is to do well in high school. We'll take care of the rest. We'll figure it out. That was like the magic slogan. Is that what you hear as well?
Yeah, I have heard that. And then it sets up these really unrealistic expectations. And it also takes away, I want to call it the hero's journey, because when you as a parent come in and you start doing all the financial aid and you start doing the work and you start helping with the applications, it's your child's and students' education. It's not yours. So really, this is time for you to do the work, because there is a lot of work for you to do to prepare. But the good news is this is work you probably want to do anyway, and really the earlier the better. But now is the time, because we want to talk about affordability and really understanding what affordability is and what we can assume. And so are we walking into this process going, okay, our mindset is there is zero college debt. We're going to figure it out. It's not like you're not going, but this is a zero debt mindset money family, right? And so if you've got that mindset, you're a little bit ahead of the game. Or if like, well, we can kind of afford this. But I would urge you, and get a pencil and write this down. I urge you to write down what you think that number is, what you think you can afford. Just write it down now. It just doesn't matter, because we're going to go through the process of taking you down a path. And then you might want to check in with your spouse to see what you think their number is, because I cannot tell you the number of divorces I've seen about college debt. And this is a debt that stays. You can't get rid of it, right? So you can't go bankrupt out of student loan debt. So really, you want to really get clear on everybody's expectation, and then maybe your child's expectation, because like you said, right, if they say, oh, you do the work, we'll figure it out. Well, and that's what your kid heard, and your kid's been telling you, hearing all their school career, you got to try to get into Harvard and Yale. And in my daughter's case, it was Rhode Island School of Design. And what happens when you get in and you find out that it's $65,000 a year with no scholarship? That's a really sad conversation to have when you realize that, wait a minute, that's not what the college budget looks like. So you want to avoid that. So that's why you want to really go in knowing your numbers and what your affordability is for you. But think about your student, because you are guiding your student, and so many people don't talk to their kids about money, and it is super easy to hit that button. My God, I couldn't believe how much debt I could have gotten into with that Parent Plus loan. Just a click of a button. It's alarming because they don't really show you the payments or how that's going to work in your budget. And, it's something that you really have to be aware of and plan for yourself. So mindset of what affordability is to you, your spouse, and your student is the number one tip that I have today.
Awesome.
For you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And before we get into number two, the other thing too, because I've seen the heartbreak conversation, as a parent, there's a high risk with that. It's not just feeling sad, but the teen there's a distrust. And if you're looking to build this connection long-term, which is like what I always focus on, Leslie, like I want long-term mentorship, like parent, adult, child love.
Yes.
Throughout the lifetime, that is important, that you just don't break that trust at that time. So really interesting that you put that, you recognize that. All right, so tip two.
Well, tip two, but I wanted to go back to your work because I was looking at your website, and I just absolutely love the wow factor, the whys, the opportunity educator, and the wealth of love. And sometimes love in the moment doesn't feel like love, or love, it doesn't seem like in the moment you're loving, right? Especially when you have these hard money conversations. But this is the best love that you can have, because I just got off the phone yesterday with somebody who's in their mid-50s who's carried student loan debt for 25 years. 25 years, that's a long time. And so, if you can help your student understand what the opportunity cost is now, right, and in the future, because it's not just about getting to the gate, right? Getting in, we're running that race to getting in, but what happens after the race? And so my number two tip really is have your student, and I bet you do this in your work, pick like 3 schools, pick 3 of their top schools, but make sure that one is like out of state, in state, and then maybe a private, and make them go through the numbers. If you want to go, this is your journey, you figure out how much all of this costs. But the thing is, you need to put it use financial tools to put the numbers in, because a lot of people do numbers. Oh, it's $50,000, let's say, but there's no context to how that works with, well, if you get a loan for 50, right? What is that loan covering? Does a student loan cover living expenses? Does it? You got to find that out. And then did you capture all of those living expenses? So anyway, you want to break the schools down, how much it's all going to cost, like before you go to school, during school. And here's my golden nugget for you. A lot of parents think, my kid is done with school, I'm done. Well, now if you haven't talked to your kid about how much things cost, and they get out of school, their rent's been paid, all their expenses have been paid, they may or may not be getting a job right away. Who's going to be carrying that living expense cost after school? It's a big shock to these kids. And then parents don't always want their kids to come back. So now a lot of kids are coming back home. So this is why it's terribly important to really help those kids understand.
Well, then that's the irony of it, right? It's like we dream of our children being these, high functioning, successful, happy adults. And yet, because we didn't show them this foundational tool of managing our money, no, they don't feel great coming back home, living under their parents' roof. And the shock of, I didn't know how much things cost when you're in your mid-20s.
Yeah.
It feels like, you know, that the carpet's been ripped under you. You weren't taught these things. And I strongly believe it comes from parents. That's our first educator. We can hire to help us. If as parents, we need help too.
Right.
But that should, before our children, hopefully before they go to college, but absolutely before they graduate with their bachelor's degree, they know how to navigate and understand what all these caveats are with financial planning.
Yes. And I would add to that, though, that it's not even all on the parents. It's our educational system that needs to change now. You know what? You can put opportunity cost on a vocabulary test if you can make our kids do calculus. You know, it's just, anyway, I'll get diverted. Don't get me started on that. Don't get me started on that. So, but anyway, so then after you get those costs done, then you want to sit down with your college counselor and go maybe through that conversation with them so they can add the variables that your student may not know, because this is a once in a time thing. You're not going to know how to do all of this. That's where you want the expert help to come in and help, right?
Yep.
And then your college counselors, though, they don't necessarily know the strategic planning of how the money flows. And that's kind of where I come in. And that's my specialty, is knowing how you're saving for the money. And that's going to be my third tip, is know your financial balance. And what does that even mean?
I was going to say, tell us
what does that mean? And I know that we are, we don't have a lot of time to go over this, and I'm going to share some kind of high strategies. And words that you may not know, and that's okay, because this is a starting point for you to know what you don't know so that you can find it out. And I also I took one of the classes that I teach a quarterly class on reviewing your balance sheet, because I teach like mindful money management. Really, it's the mindful process of knowing what you're doing and why, and how much is enough, and what your guidelines are for making decisions with your money and in your life. So and I'm not sure how we're going to get this out, but I have a link to a class that you can take. I'm offering it on Sunday and at 4:00, and I'm going to walk you through this financial balance sheet. If you just come, it's absolutely free, because I want you to know this before you go into this whole process. So with that in mind, the first thing you need to know is your balance. And what does that mean? What does that even mean, right? It is taking an inventory of the assets that you own and an inventory of the liabilities that you owe. So what do you own? What do you owe? Doing the calculation of the difference. And that's one really quick way to know what you can afford, because if that's negative, guess what? That's going to be hard for you to afford that. But then the conversation comes in with, and again, this depends on each family's variables. Like, how old are you? There's a lot of older parents. And so you really want to look at your retirement planning, right? So it's like, how much do you have saved for retirement? And how far are you to retirement? That's going to make your decision as a younger person and my decision as an older person a lot different of what really is affordable to me. And then what are your goals and dreams? What other things do you have in your life that you need to and want to take care of? And are you willing to sacrifice what you want for this educational experience for your student? And then how are you going to feel if you're in a lot of debt and your student hates that field and no longer is in that field and then doesn't want to pay you back? It gets pretty deep. That's why you want to know what really is affordable to you. And then you want to go through this same process for your student.
Yes.
And if your first thought is, well, my kid doesn't have any money, why? I'm not going to do that. You know what? Yes, you do, because you're going to teach them how to make decisions using these tools that help you. They're choice management tools. They sound fancy and difficult, but they are choice management tools that you can learn to use, right?
Yes.
So
love that term, choice management tools. It's not as scary when you look at it that way. And and that's one thing. So my personal experience with my eldest, second year college student, we did fold in affordability early because I just knew that how important it was more for her and for us, but for her
Right.
to understand why are we as parents making certain decisions, and that
Yes.
the affordability factor was always part of her list. And then she would engage in some assignments that we'd say, so she can kind of figure out, well, cost of attendance, I mean, that's a scary number, which is like, the cost of both tuition and fees and living and breathing as a student, book supplies.
Yes.
But then she could break it down and say, oh, there's some flexibility with where I live or how many meals a week I would have. And
Yes.
so that affordability factor came down right to the decision. And by the time there's this grid, she had important factors that it was her own. Mom and dad had our own factors, and some were different.
Right.
We created a huge spreadsheet. So we had
Yes.
every family member's preferences on there.
Yes.
And it was amazing to see Bella's ability to analyze all of her college choices. She got scholarships for some.
Yeah.
One university was a Western undergraduate exchange, which is a special scholarship for California students.
Yes.
For Western public schools. And the question she was asking, well, I wouldn't pay $60,000 to go to Seattle U when I have these other options. And she ended up making that decision.
Yes.
And
Yes.
in my heart, I was just like, oh my God, this was totally possible. And she understood, like, mom still wants to go to Spain. But and we told her about what retirement meant for us. And if we didn't take her retirement, we're going to ask her for money.
Yeah.
And what a burden would that be?
No, as someone who supported their in-laws for 15 years because they did not save for retirement, I'm telling you right now, it's one of the other things I'm passionate about, helping families understand that their choices are really, legacy choices, and they impact, your children down the line. So really, this is critical work, but we can make it fun and a lot less complicated. And I know that's what you do too. You help people navigate through this whole process. So you don't have the big old learning curve because you've spent years developing and knowing your expertise, as I have. So, when you have a team, and that's the other key thing, is get a team and get insight. You have to engage. It's your student's journey. You're guiding them, and then we're guiding the guide to help you make really educated decisions so that you go in with your eyes wide open and excited. And then when you get out of school, maybe you want to travel for 6 months, a year, and decompress. And you can, if you have zero debt, college debt.
Ooh,
maybe that's what you pony up if your kid wants to take care of that. There's just so many different strategies that you can do, but just not putting your head in the sand and ignoring it and just going what everybody else is telling you the best, right? You define what's best for you and what looks like success.
And this is why I am such a fan of your work, is because the mindset shift, that instead of dread, to have this kind of conversation of you have choices now of what you want to do after, celebrating that because of strong financial planning, it's so uplifting. And so I'm just so grateful that you're here for our families. And I just wanted to kind of summarize the 3 tips. So tip number 1, the mindset shift. And, self expectations. What are the expectations? I love the exercise you did about just write down the number you think you can afford, have your spouse do it, have your teen do it. And then that is like the reveal of how off it might be.
And then you do the balance sheet, and then you do some of those, and then you include the pick the 3 schools, and then you really go back to that number and go, whoa, that was not close to what I was thinking, how that was.
Yeah. Okay. So the first step is the reveal. The second step is to, go look at assets and liabilities. So moving forward with researching 3 colleges, just for have a teen do it.
Yes.
You can kind of just exercise, like, what is out there? How are colleges communicating costs?
Yes.
And then going through that balance sheet.
Yes.
Right? And if I just, again, like, all these tips sound amazing, but I would be so like, Leslie, where do I begin with you? Talk more about the class. I think, what's the class? Know before you go. Is that that 2-day class?
Yes, I created it just because we're having this conversation. And I've twisted it, well, not twisted it, but made it specifically for people who are having students going into college. So when I have that call on Sunday, it's the same structure that I do with everybody, because really the balance sheet is where everybody needs to start, but they just don't know it. So I'll just go through that and give you some tips on what you need to think about for that affordability decision. And then at the end of that, I will offer some additional help. So if you want additional help, I have, I can help, but I want to start with just showing you some tips and tricks so that if you can figure out what works best for you and your family.
All right.
So, yeah.
The new first step, everybody. I'm eliminating all the first step is you have to come on Sunday. Like, just start. Know before you go. Workshop. It's free. You have an expert with you. That is such a great starting point. And then you're going to help them through the other tips. And
right. Yeah.
Other than this course, where can they find you? What's the best contact?
Well, that's a good question. I'm at structuredsuccess.com, and you can find all my work there. My website is in process. Like, you know what? I'm on that educational journey too with website design. So, but you can find a lot of my information there, and certainly contact me. I have a contact page. And I do offer a free 15-minute strategic planning session. So that's on my site. If you put in your name and click, you'll find that button. And but I'm happy to help, because I want to make sure that your family and you are prepared for your goals and dreams, because that's what we're really talking about here. We're talking about how do we live our goals and dreams. And I do have that program I wrote, 7 Steps to Fund a Life You Love Living, which is really, what do I want? Why do I want it? How am I going to get there? How am I going to have the time and the money and the vision? And it's creating that work. So
I am so excited. I'm just so excited to get my hands on that book as well. So everyone, I'm going to drop the link to the course. That's going to be this Sunday at 4:00.
Yep.
I expect everyone to be there. And then Leslie, just thank you so much for your time. This has been so valuable.